we've got a big show there. We got a big show today, Boone. Okay, let's be clear. Like, we got a big show today. Cram week continues to roll on. We are going to talk about guys we're afraid that we might be wrong about this year. Always one of my favorite topics to discuss because nothing's better than freaking out about your takes at the very last minute. But before we get to that, we do have two pieces of wide receiver news to hit on here, Justin Boone. First one is Adam Thielen is traded to the Minnesota Vikings. He's going back home. His family's going back home to Minnesota. It was basically like a big package of picks that included a 2027 fourth rounder, which I actually kind of thought that was a pretty decent return for Carolina to get. They didn't have, like, the Vikings are just assuming all of his salary too. I know Thielen was a really good player for them last year, but he's a 35-year-old wide receiver. So again, pretty good return for the Panthers to get there. I will throw it to you this way, Boone. How did you celebrate what is now going to be known here Wednesday, August 27th? How did you celebrate Jalen Coker Day in your household?
I moved him up probably 20 to 25 spots in my rankings. There was just no way around the projection when you had Thielen there as well. When you have, the other guys, obviously McMillan went very high on, Xavier Legette, Jadavian Sanders at tight end. There's just so many different options there that it was hard to get him a projection that was going to move him up the rankings enough. And yet now it's very interesting, and he is quite close in my rankings to Xavier Legette. And I could see that go either way. I think either one of those guys could end up really emerging as the number two in that offense, especially because McMillan can be that like true number one for Bryce Young, the guy who's going to draw that defensive attention. So he's really the only big winner in this. I maybe could make a case on the other side for my guy, JJ McCarthy, because early in the season, it was going to be Justin Jefferson and TJ Hawkinson and not much else there in the Minnesota pass catching game. And yet now he's getting this veteran guy that knows the offense, that knows a lot of the pieces there. That's going to help them get through some of the early weeks where the schedule isn't too bad for them either. But then you look at it, Thielen maybe will have some fantasy value in the early weeks. Once Jordan Addison comes back, Thielen's not really going to be a guy that you're going to want to have on your roster anymore. So enjoy the week or two that you're going to get with Thielen where he could be maybe a flex play in your lineup. But once Jordan Addison's back, that offense is going to be humming, and you're not going to trust the 35-year-old. Is Adam Thielen older than you are, Harmon?
He's 1 year older than me. When I called him super old a couple weeks ago, we were the same age. Now he's officially older than me. He just turned 35, I think, last week. So yes, how dare you, Boone? But yes, Adam Thielen is older. Hey, he's way younger than you, pal. Let's just put it that. While we're throwing barbs here at each other, he's way younger than you. So let's just be super clear about that. But no, I think it's interesting with Thielen in Minnesota because. You probably can't. It's not like it's the same coaching staff. It's been a minute since he's been there. Obviously, he's never played with Kevin O'Connell before, but Kevin O'Connell does have experience with players like Adam Thielen that are kind of these bigger slot receivers. And I've heard from people close to the team that like Kevin O'Connell has wanted his version of Jawan Jennings, which I think like now we think of Jawan Jennings, but when somebody told me this was like before Jawan Jennings had broken out. So basically he wants like a big slot, dirty work, third down guy. That is Adam Thielen. So, I mean, it is certainly an interesting addition. It is one that they needed. I don't know that you're going to be running out to start him in week one, but maybe if he does have a nice week one against that Bears team on Monday Night Football, you're thinking about starting him maybe in week 2, week 3, but then that's probably about it. Before we get back to the Panthers wide receivers, just real quick, does this change what you think at all about Jordan Addison this year? I think I finally drafted my first Jordan Addison team literally today in the 8th round of like a full PPR, start a bunch of wide receivers. I think it is a great value, but I also thought to myself, I mean, when he's back, like Jordan Addison, I already kind of thought he was a little bit of a regression candidate anyways, because I think the Vikings are going to throw less and they're not going to throw downfield as much necessarily with JJ McCarthy. We're all expecting the run game to be more a part of the equation here. Like now that we've got Thielen in the mix, like Thielen will still be on the field and like command targets and stuff like that. I don't think he takes away from Jefferson, but do you think he might nip at the heels of Jordan Addison just a little bit?
I don't really think so. I mean, Jalen Naylor had a role in that offense. He would pop up a little bit. I don't think Thielen's going to be the kind of guy that's going to command the volume that he has some past years. At his age, there's also like a serious injury concern with him, right? He's dealt with a lot of soft tissue injuries. A guy in his mid 30s, even though I laugh saying that based on the fact that our ages, but a guy that has had these soft tissue injuries, you worry at this stage of his career, is he going to be able to give you a full season? But they don't need him to give them a full season. They just need him to get them through those first 3 weeks. So it's a very, very smart move by an organization that's made, let's face it, a ton of smart moves over the last few years. And they can give up that draft capital. They're fine. They've drafted really well. They have a lot of picks, I believe. So I'm not worried about them giving up that much to get him, even though I think this is just a pure early season rental and maybe that guy that can, help you out in some crucial moments, but not the kind of player that's going to get the volume that's really going to impact anybody else in this offense fantasy wise.
Yeah, and I'll just say real quickly, back in Carolina, I'm with you that I moved both Xavier Legette and Jalen Coker inside my top 60 wide receivers, guys that you can draft at this point in the late rounds. I didn't really think either of them was draftable with Thielen there because I think Thielen was going to hold down a role for the vast majority of the season. I do wonder if this affects Bryce Young a little bit. Just that's like a quick aside, just because him and Thielen did have a really good connection. But nevertheless, I do really trust, and clearly the Panthers really trust these young wide receivers to step up. And I went ahead and just did the hedge ranking on these guys. Coker and Legette right back to back because straight up, Coker was the better player in year one, over 70% success rate versus man and press coverage. Legette obviously has a lot more developing to do, but Legette's an older prospect. How much does he really have left? To develop is what I mean, but I think he'll be in a better position there. Meanwhile, again, Coker's just a guy I absolutely love. Like Legette should be the favorite, but I think Coker was better as a rookie. What if he's just better in year two? And Dave Canales has said, we're going to play our best guys. And the reason that they're trading Adam Thielen is because Thielen was that big slot receiver. Coker is that big slot receiver. So this is a guy that I talked about midway through last year once he started getting playing time. I was like, oh, he's popping in reception perception in a Jacoby Myers type of way, another former undrafted wide receiver. So I'm really high on Coker. Hopefully you got him in Dynasty before this because now he's going to be a little bit more difficult to trade for.
Yeah, absolutely. And I had to check when you said that. I have one spot between Xavier Legette and Coker. So I'm right there with you. We're all kind of hedging a little bit. And like I said off the top, we don't know how it's going to go. And I think it's better that we're honest about that rather than we just take some crazy, hard stance that this is definitely going to be the guy. No, some situations you have to see them play out. And that's how I rank. That's how I approach fantasy. So I want to make sure I'm giving people the same information.
All right. Well, we did get some new information, some clarity finally. I'm so sick of talking about this, but Rashee Rice, we now know that he will be suspended for the first 6 weeks. So any idea that he was going to wait till that arbitration date that I feel like we've talked about previously, no, not going to happen. He is suspended for the first 6 games of the season this year. So Boone, I know you have talked a lot about Rashee Rice as a guy that you were definitely willing to draft and wait on, taking that risk with the middle of season suspension. How does this, now that we know it's the first 6 weeks, change your outlook, if at all?
I think this is weirdly like a positive, and it sounds very strange to say that when you're talking about a very serious car accident that began this whole process. But for fantasy specifically, this is kind of a positive for his outlook because now we at least know the situation, right? When we talked in the Vegas show about Rashee Rice, I was saying the only thing we weren't sure about was could he end up with a suspension that leaves him out of the picture for the fantasy playoffs? Because if they were going to wait until that hearing, that was certainly going to be a possibility in terms of length or how long it was going to take to get a ruling on that. Now we know. And yes, I had hoped earlier in the offseason that it was going to be somewhere between 2 and 4 games. Now we're looking at 6, but at least we know it is going to be the first 6 games of the year when bye weeks are not really an issue or not much of an issue. They'll come into play at the very end of it. And most guys are going to be healthy at the beginning of the season. So there's going to be lots of options, lots of other players you can get into your lineup. And then after that, as long as he stays healthy, you're going to have a guy that could be a top 12, top 15 fantasy receiver. So you're going to have a little work to do early in the season, and you're not going to be able to get some of the names that I suggested, like a Jordan Addison, potentially pairing him with. But there's other guys that you could go out there and grab who could have good starts to the season. Maybe even one of his teammates potentially that could step in there, and you could get them in your lineup for that stretch and then get him back. But I've said before, maybe I'm just like a very confident fantasy player, and I believe that I'm going to be able to get through those weeks and still have a winning record and then add that kind of hammer piece to my lineup after that. But one of the things I brought up was what Nico Collins did last year, right? He missed basically 7 games. It was 5 full games and the majority of 2 others. And he finished as the wide receiver 22 overall on the season, not per game. Overall, he still went over 1,000 yards. He still had 7 touchdowns. I think that's very much in play for Rice here. So to get him where people have been getting him, I'm curious to see if people take this news as a bad thing and his ADP actually drops more. But he's somebody that I want on as many teams as I can have, because as the year goes along, you're trying to make trades to get those stars on your team for the stretch run. This is a guy that you can get at a pretty good value, and he's just going to show up in your lineup in week 7.
Yeah, previously when I thought the suspension was going to come in the middle of the year, I basically said, like, I just honestly don't want you to draft him, and like I'll put him in like the 80s or the hundreds, and somebody else is just always going to take him, you know, like Boone would take him ahead of me. Now I've moved him into kind of like the 60s. So basically I think he's a 6th round pick, maybe late 5th if you want to push it. And I agree with you. Like, obviously, I think the most likely scenario is he comes back and he is that like hammer piece as you described. The only things that I think give me a little bit of pause is more of like less of a Rice thing. It's just, if you're taking him, you do have to pass up on like all these receivers we've talked about, you know, all off season long that I really, really like. You know, you're probably going to take him instead of like Roma Dunze, Ricky Pearsall, and Emeka Egbuka. And I'm like, damn, I really have. And look, I'm kind of hoping that those guys produce what Rashee Rice has previously produced, right? I'm hoping they become that player. So maybe that's an argument against myself, but I'm going to get those guys for the first 6 weeks and be able to find out, as opposed to Rashee Rice, who I think you might have to, obviously you're going to have to wait on. And then the only other thing I am a little skeptical on, I don't want to just write in pen that he's going to come back and be the guy that he was for the first 3 games of the season, where he was number 2 in both targets per route and target share behind Malik Neighbors in terms of target share. And Cooper Kupp actually in the first 3 weeks of last year was getting a lot of targets per route run. I don't want to just write in pen he immediately comes back to that workload, because they're talking about, hey, we want to push the football down the field. This is a guy with like a sub 5 air yards per target mark. Could he be part of the pushing it downfield? Yes, but we just haven't seen him be that player yet. So again, I think the right answer is Rashee Rice, late 5th round, early 6th round. You take him, you wait on it. But I just don't want to immediately assume that I'm definitely getting those. That I don't want to copy paste the production from the first 3 weeks, because they want to get Xavier Worthy more involved. And like, he's a guy who could take a leap in the second season. So overall, that's just kind of how I'm approaching it. But I think we're pretty close. Like, where are you ranking him? Where are you advising people draft him?
Yeah, nothing changed for me today on where I had him ranked. I think I have him as wide receiver 28, and I would totally take him in the end of the 5th and definitely in the 6th round. And it's like you said, I've seen him do it before. I've seen him over the course, and I know it was like 2 separate stretches, but as a rookie, he was a top 15 fantasy receiver over the final 10 games that year, which is great to see. They kind of brought him on slowly. And then you talked about it early last season, those first 3 games, averaged the 6th most targets per game, the 3rd most fantasy points per game during that stretch. And I really think when they came back this year, what were the reports out of practice? They were peppering him with targets. They were throwing him the ball constantly. He is the new focal point of that offense. And I think all the other things you said, they can push the ball downfield. They have these other speedy guys. They have Xavier Worthy. They have Hollywood Brown, hoping that, you know, he's healthy at some point. They have these guys that can do that and let Rice work underneath and let Rice work over the middle of the field. And I think it's really the guy I'm more worried about in terms of pushing the ball downfield is Travis Kelce, because I think we're seeing, and we've already seen it start, the transition away from Kelce being the focal point of this offense to Kelce just being more of a contributor. Doesn't mean he can't be a bad fantasy player. I think he's still a mid-range tight end 1, but him not being that main guy in this passing attack anymore, and it going to Rashee Rice and then Worthy and these other players. And that's why I think the excitement should be there about this passing game, because they have restocked that receiver core pretty well. And I think once Rashee Rice is back, we're going to see some fireworks from them.
All right, we're actually going to come back to the Chiefs here in just a little bit as we roll into the main point of the show here, because I have a Chiefs player to discuss. As Cram Week rolls on today, Justin Boone and I are going to give our 5 players each that we're going against consensus ADP, consensus rankings on right now, we're trying to highlight the guys, honestly, we might be a little nervous that we're wrong about heading into the season. I wrote a piece for the site using some of these guys. Boone and I actually there's a couple players that he picked here that I actually have in my article as well. So again, these are the players we are not drafting. We are fading these guys, but we might be a little bit nervous that we might be wrong on these players. So Boone, let's get into our first picks. And actually, I'll just give mine here first since we were just talking about the Chiefs.
Sure.
Mine is Patrick Mahomes here. I have him at QB6. Expert consensus rank is QB6 as well. So I'm not going against it from a positional standpoint, but I have Mahomes like 75th to 80th overall. His consensus rank is like 61st overall, but more importantly, his Yahoo ADP over the last 7 days is 52nd overall. So that is a big gap from where I have him ranked to where he is going in Yahoo drafts. And it's not as if I dislike Mahomes at all. I actually think that this offense could take a step forward. I think that Xavier Worthy year 2, Travis Kelce in getting ready to get married shape. Everybody knows this. You don't get in best shape of your life to play football. You get in the best shape of your life to get married, especially when your future wife is a multi-billion-dollar pop star. You better be in good shape. I think he already looks like he's in better shape from some of these engagement photos. So there's that. Rashee Rice obviously coming back healthy once he gets back from suspension. Like, here's the thing, Boone. I'm just not drafting Mahomes. I don't think I've clicked him once. And that makes me pretty uncomfortable when I say all these things. And, could this be the year he goes back to averaging a 6.5 touchdown rate when he's been at 4.5 the last 2 years? He was at 6.5 from 2018 to 2022. He gets that touchdown mojo back. They're pushing the football down the field. The offensive line with Josh Simmons has been fixed. Again, it's like, I understand he's QB6, but I just think that he's closer to all these other guys. But if he proves me wrong and he's closer to Joe Burrow at QB5 than these other dudes that we're showing on the screen here, I'm not going to have any exposure to the Patrick Mahomes rebirth season, and it's going to be because of structural reasons. Like, I'm going to feel like an ass clown if that's what happens.
I mean, you look at it, right? The last 2 years, QB 13 in fantasy points per game in 2024, tied for QB 12 in 2023. Hasn't been the same guy that was out there just lighting it up early in his career. And part of that is the way defenses were playing them, and he made those decisions to kind of change, and they became a little more of, I don't want to say a dink and dunk offense, but he was taking what the defense was giving him. And you saw that in the numbers too, right? Like, his yards per attempt was over 8 yards most of his career. The last 2 seasons, it dipped to 7 and then 6.8 last year. So I think that's also why they're talking about, we have to start pushing the ball downfield, because at some point you're going to run out of room there. You can't just keep playing that short game. I agree with you that I think the decision to push him down the board for me is just more about the quarterback position for fantasy this year and how many great quarterbacks there are. It's not even an indictment on him. It's just, I think he is closer to those guys that are behind him versus the Burrow of it all and the elite group up there. So for me, yeah, I'm winning. I think I have him even lower than you. I have him at 100 overall. And that is going to mean that I'm not getting him anywhere. But that's because if I'm going to wait that long at quarterback, I'm probably going to be willing to take Dak Prescott. I'm probably going to be willing to take one of the sophomore guys like Drake May or even JJ McCarthy, who I always talk about. I would rather go with one or two of those guys than take Mahomes where he's going. Now, there has been some leagues, some best ball leagues, some leagues where, if I'm going against other analysts and I just want to make sure like I'm getting that baseline quarterback play, and then later on I'll take a shot on somebody that I think has big time upside, I will do it. But in regular redraft leagues, I do not have much of Mahomes at all. And it's more about the position and the depth of the position and his sort of inability to compete with those guys that have been putting up the elite seasons recently. I almost want to see him do it again before I'm willing to spend up and grab him and hope that he can put up those kind of numbers, because he runs a little bit, but he just can't match what those guys are doing on the ground. So unless he puts up one of those 40, 45, 50 touchdown seasons, it's going to be really hard for him to pay it off.
Yeah, well, when he launches like 2 deep touchdowns to Tyquan Thornton, who made the roster and has been like the talk of the offseason, weirdly enough, man, I saw Greg Rosenthal tweet like, "Oh my God, the last thing Bill Belichick needs is Andy Reid reviving Tyquan Thornton." Like that's just a little more dirt on the grave there for Bill Belichick. But anyways, when he launches 2 touchdowns to Tyquan Thornton in the Brazil game in the opener, we're gonna feel like idiots for saying like, yeah, don't draft Mahomes because of structural reasons. But let's get into your first player, Boone, that you think you might, you're a little worried you might be wrong about.
So I love this topic because there was a name that came to mind immediately. I've been worried about this one nonstop, but we've talked about this player before. Jameson Williams on the Lions. I mean, he had the breakout year last year, and all the reports in the offseason have been very glowing about how he's been crushing it in practice and just been fantastic out there. And last year, the breakout kind of came at the expense of, I would say, Sam Laporta, right? Like Laporta had a great season the year before. And then now you add another set of hands there looking for the ball. And now you get into this math problem. And Jameson was able to come out with it last year and have a good season. But now we have some more things to consider. We've talked a million times about Ben Johnson, their offensive coordinator, their great play caller. He's gone. What's that going to mean for this offense? The offensive line, the changes on the interior, losing Frank Ragnow and Kevin Zeitler. Those are big problems. But, and this is where I might just clear the lane and let you go here, Harmon, the emergence of Isaac Tesla. Like, is this going to be the next problem here? Is this the next addition to this offense? We saw Tim Patrick get traded. So now Isaac Tesla, he is going to be out there. He is going to be in 3 receiver sets. He can make plays. He can score touchdowns. He's that big body guy. He looked great in the preseason. And I'm not saying he's going to overtake J-Mo right away, but J-Mo, he has a club option next year, right? Are they going to keep him around? It was that Tesla move. They went out. They basically spent three third-round picks in order to make that trade to get Isaac Tesla. Is this a situation where now we're adding another set of hands on top of Amon-Ra, on top of Jahmyr Gibbs, on top of Laporta, who's still there, J-Mo, Isaac Tesla, so many players there that are going to be looking for the ball. I think there's just a serious math problem, and I've ranked J-Mo lower because of it, almost like we talked about with the Panthers receivers, where you're just trying to figure out when there's that many guys who's getting the ball here. We're talking about a better offense, but we're talking about much more talented players as well. Is he going to be able to build on what he did last year, even match what he did last year? I'm not so sure, but I'll tell you, I am scared that he is going to make me look foolish.
Look at Isaac Tesla there on the starting depth chart. That, I mean, what a beautiful sight. Thing of beauty right there. Old Vanillatron. I've seen that like in a reply to one of the tweets. So shout out Vanillatron, Isaac Tesla. No, man, I mean, look, if you're not, by the way, if you missed this morning, Tim Patrick was traded to the Jacksonville Jaguars from the Detroit Lions. Just basically clears the way for Isaac Tesla to be the wide receiver 3, the big bodied guy that they've been looking for. And I mean, I think the conversion from him as like a slot receiver at Arkansas to like a big bodied vertical X is so inspired. It's been so cool to watch. I want to continue to watch it. So yeah, I mean, look, I'm not going to sit here and say that Isaac Tesla is going to come in here from, look, I so badly want him to be good because number one, he's so intriguing of a player. Athletic comparables to literally, again, if you did not listen to our draft coverage, these are some of the mock draftable athletic comparisons for Isaac Tesla. Allen Robinson, Rome Odunze, Javon Walker, wait for it, Andre Johnson. Like, these are the athletic comparables for Tesla, but yet he was this non-productive college slot receiver at Arkansas. And like, I thought there was some really intriguing stuff on film, really intriguing reception perception profile on him. But, you know, still a guy that went higher than I expected. And I always want him to be, I so badly want him to be good so that the people who are so arrogant about like college production, they just get to take the L on this one. So I'm really invested in it in that way. But do I think he's going to come in here in year one and like really shake up the target distribution? Maybe not, but I still totally understand where you're at with Jameson Williams, who I'm kind of between consensus and you in terms of my Jameson Williams ranking, where I'm just maybe a couple spots ahead of you and maybe a couple spots behind consensus here. Not a guy I'm like totally going out of my way to fade, but not a guy I'm totally going out of my way to draft. I feel like, though, Boone, the way this ends up going for you is just some weeks you're going to feel bad about the Williams fade and some weeks you're going to feel really good because he's just kind of that type of player. He probably never commands like a lion's share of the targets, no pun intended, but he also is going to just rip big plays on low volume. That is the type of player he is.
Yeah. I'll also mention too, Jared Goff. We talk about Baker Mayfield and some potential touchdown regression for him. Jared Goff, 37 touchdowns last year, by far the most during his 9 years in the NFL. That led to a 6.9% TD rate, well above his career rate of 4.8. So another area where we could see some regression in that offense, especially when you talk about an offense that has two phenomenal running backs who could potentially get a lot of touchdowns there. As much as I say David Montgomery is another guy that we're trying to figure out, is he going to be able to get the same kind of volume? There's totally scenarios where David Montgomery still scores double-digit touchdowns and falls into the end zone in this offense, and that takes away from some of these receivers and their upside because they don't put up as big touchdown totals. So I think there's just a lot of guys there, and it's scaring me, and I don't really believe in Jared Goff, and their schedule is much harder this year, and I just feel like someone is going to feel that pain, and I think it's going to be Jameson Williams. I certainly hope that it's not me that feels that pain, though.
Like I said, some weeks I think it is just because he's that type of player. He's going to put up big weeks almost no matter what. But man, again, it just comes back to that range of wide receivers that we've been talking about. There's a lot of really good options there, and if you want to break ties against Jameson because of all the reasons that Boone just laid out there, I think that's perfectly reasonable. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we have more players that Justin Boone and I are afraid we might be wrong about. We'll get into those right after this. All right, we are back. Justin Boone and I are continuing to run through players that we're against consensus on, and we are worried we might be wrong about. Boone, I'm going to let you pick this one up first. Give me another player you're worried you might be wrong about.
So this one is boring, but I thought it was important to bring up because we've talked about this player and how we feel about this team so much, and it's been mostly negative. Tyreek Hill on the Dolphins. As much as we've discussed all the red flags, right? The signs of decline last year, the question marks about the offensive line, the splits with and without Tua, and Tua playing behind that offensive line with his durability concerns and the worries there, the strange press conferences and causing problems where there doesn't need to be problems at a time of year when everything should be positive, all these different things about Tyreek Hill. And yet, would it actually shock you if he comes out and has 1,500 yards and 12 touchdowns or something? He's still potentially that player. And maybe we are wrong about the fact that some of the decline last year, maybe it was because Tua wasn't out there the whole time. Like, I see that possibility, even though I look at the numbers and you look at the fact that, like, I mean, his average yards per reception, 15.1 in the past, 11.8 last year, like just a huge drop off there. some of the other concerns too, right? Like just his age and the type of receiver that he is, and how those guys can kind of go away pretty quickly sometimes. How Jalen Waddle is basically like the star of off-season Dolphins camp, and they're talking him up. And we know that Jalen Waddle can be that very productive receiver for them. He did it just a few years ago where he had over 1,300 yards and 8 touchdowns. So as much as I worry that the Dolphins thing could go off the rails, that there's so many signs that this could be Mike McDaniel's last year, that Tyreek Hill could get traded at some point, there is still like that glimmer of he is still the cheetah. And man, what if he comes out and he had a healthy offseason and he gets out there? But that's another one. Oblique injury, missed a bunch of time leading up to week 1. Like, it's one of those things where the name is so strong and the past production is so strong that it's making me like doubt everything that I'm seeing on the page, which is telling me do not draft this guy. And I've gone with my gut and I have not drafted him very many places. I still have him in a couple dynasty teams where I wasn't able to unload him. But man, there's a path for him to make me look very wrong, I think.
Man, they're even talking about Malik Washington, who's had a nice preseason, is running as like the pure wide receiver 3. It's been like a hell of a last couple of days for the like true RP sicko deep dives. We've got Jalen Coker, Torrey Horton starting. MVS got cut. Tim Patrick's out. Isaac Tesla's in. Malik Washington. It looks like he's going to be the third receiver. He'll be the number 2 receiver once Tyreek Hill gets traded at the midseason point. So it's up. It's up for us like true RP sicko deep dive players right now for sure. But no, on the Tyreek Hill stuff. Obviously, yes, it's easy to envision a scenario where he kills you in the 3rd round where you just completely faded him there because of the name value. But I will say, Boone, and this is why I didn't even really include him in the article of like guys that I'm afraid I'm wrong about, even though I just haven't drafted too much of him. I've never seen a player once they start to decline in their 30s like this return back to elite form. Like I think there are scenarios where Tyreek Hill is still like a usable, functional, even like a good fantasy wide receiver. I think those scenarios exist, but I don't think the thing I'm just betting against is that he returns back to elite form. Probably the closest guy that we can say has done this is Keenan Allen with the Chargers, his last year there. I still maintain that he did not return to like elite form as an individual player, but he did return to like high end production. But that was really because he was the only game in town. Like if you remember that season, Mike Williams out in the first 3 weeks, Quentin Johnston replaced him. Quentin Johnston was not ready to replace anybody at that point. Like Josh Palmer was there, but he's like a role player. And that offense stunk because they basically just fed the ball to Keenan Allen underneath. But he was productive in fantasy. It's hard to imagine that happens here in Miami because Jalen Waddle's there. Obviously Devon Achane is there. Maybe there are scenarios where like it is all those guys get hurt and then it is Tyreek Hill and that's how he returns to like elite productive form. But I struggle to envision the scenario where he bounces all the way back to top level receiver play, but I can see scenarios, Boone, where he's taken in the 3rd round and he returns something like a 3rd round pick value in fantasy.
Well, I saved one thing in my pocket here to make me feel better at the end of the Tyreek section, and that's going back to our friend Ryan Heath at Fantasy Points, his age curve study. He identified year 10 as the season when receivers have their first significant statistical dip. They fall to 77.2% of their career baseline production. So Tyreek Hill, year 10, all these other things. It's just yet another red flag that we can add to his profile. So I think I'm going to be okay on this one. I'm certainly more worried about Jameson Williams potentially making me look bad and him taking his game to another level versus Tyreek based on what we saw last year. So I think I'm going to be all right, but figured I'd add that one just to make the point a little stronger.
Yeah, you're just fading all the fast receivers who can make their week in one play, which is definitely a way to feel bad on an every other week basis. Yeah. We asked the YouTube chat, if you're watching us live right now on YouTube, shout out to you. Subscribe to the channel, please. Like and subscribe. Come on, what are we doing here? If you're watching and you're not you're not subscribed, my feelings are hurt, honestly. Anyways, we asked the chat, 71% of people who voted said they are also fading Tyreek Hill at his current ADP, which is no surprise if you've been watching us on this channel. We've given you a lot of reasons to be skeptical about Tyreek here heading into 2025. I'll give my next player that I'm a little worried I'm wrong about. And honestly, I'm worried I'm wrong about this guy, Boone, because like I didn't intend to be like multiple wide receiver spots low. I mean, a ton. I have Courtland Sutton on like as wide receiver 30 something, 36, and his consensus ranking is 21. And I didn't even mean for this to happen. I don't even know how it happened, honestly. I didn't go into this being like, I don't want any part of Courtland Sutton. It's just that, and I talked about this a little bit yesterday with Scott, where he's very, very in on Courtland Sutton. And to me, like, I just keep finding these other newer receivers to put ahead of him. You know, I like, all right, well, I really want people to be getting Ricky Pearsall if they're using my rankings. He's definitely going ahead of Courtland Sutton. I really want you to be taking Emeka Egbuka if you're using my rankings. Well, he's definitely going ahead of Courtland Sutton. I really want you to get Rome Odunze, Travis Hunter, Tedero McMillan. All right, those guys are going ahead of Courtland. It's just he keeps going down and down and down and down and down. So it's not an intentional thing. And I even feel stupid about this, Boone, because I think Courtland Sutton is not a perfect player, but he had a nice season last year. 71.2% success rate versus man in reception perception. Now he's got flaws in his game. Not a great zone beater. He was actually 73rd among qualifying receivers in yards after catch per reception. He doesn't give you a lot after catch, but the Broncos are kind of trying to piece together that second wide receiver position with some combination of Marvin Mims and Troy Franklin and Pat Bryant. But is that just going to be more? Is it just like, all right, fine, it's more Courtland Sutton? So I definitely see a lot of ways where he outproduces where I have him ranked, which is why, again, wide receiver 36. That feels so stupid. I actually have him, and this is kind of where it comes down to it. Is just, again, I have him at 66th overall, and he's going 65th overall in Yahoo ADP. So again, I'm not saying like fade Courtland Sutton. Don't take Courtland Sutton. It's just like if you're stacking wide receivers, there are other guys I'd rather have. And it is these guys that I just straight up think have better ceilings than Courtland Sutton. So Boone, I know like when you're doing rankings, how do you sort of like in real time adjust to that? You know what I'm saying? Like, all right, well, I know he's going to outproduce some of those guys, but I just think the other players have higher ceilings.
It's exactly the way you broke it down. And that's why tiers are so important, right? And like I have my tiers up on Yahoo. People could take a look at that. That's the way to draft. To get max value, you're going to look at those tiers and you're going to try to hit on the players. You're going to wait till that tier's almost gone and make sure you're hitting those tiers right before they dry up and go to the next one. And I feel the exact same way. I don't have Sutton quite as low as you do. I have him at wide receiver 31. I thought I was going to be the lowest on him by far. I didn't know that you were even lower, but it's for all the same reasons. It's all the guys in that range that are just so interesting, that have really high ceilings. And the fact that like a guy who has like career highs at 29 years old, like, are we buying into that? I know the Broncos are buying into that because they gave him a contract, but do we really think that he's going to be able to continue that when they've gone out and added all these other pieces, and not to continuously go back to the idea of like projections and figuring it out math wise? But I think that's so useful to do, because when I sit down and I work on that stuff, you start to kind of see that there's just not paths to certain players getting to where you want them to be. And it forces me to adjust my rankings. You look at this offense. I mean, Evan Ingram, he's going to be involved. You mentioned all the names here, like Pat Bryant. I know he's the fourth receiver. I think he's going to be involved in that rotation with Mims, with Troy Franklin. Now we have not one, but two interesting backs in the backfield there, where last year they didn't really have any. There's so many guys on this offense that I think are going to be able to contribute, that I don't really think that Courtland Sutton is going to be able to match the numbers that he did last year. Even if he is still a decent fantasy play, like you said, I would rather go with those younger guys that are on the way up versus, you know, an older receiver that I'm kind of going to cross my fingers and just hope that he can match what he did last year at a stage of his career where, I mean, guys just normally don't come up and put up those career numbers and then keep doing it when they reach 30 and beyond. So I'm worried about him for sure. And yeah, I think I'm willing to take him though, because he still is in that range with all those other names. He is going to be able to produce. He's going to be somebody that you're probably not going to be sad to have on your fantasy team, but he's a guy that I just am not getting a lot of because I would rather invest in some of those younger names that I think have higher ceilings and could potentially break into that top 20 or even higher.
Yeah, if he hits small. And I want the guys that if they hit big type situation, which is, again, it's just about like how you approach drafts and fantasy and things like that, whether you're taking Courtland Sutton there or not. Okay, let's go to your next player that you're a little worried you might be wrong about.
Okay, so another guy that I've brought up in the past, but I think there are paths to him potentially burning me, and that's DJ Moore on the Bears. I mean, it seems crazy to veer away from a receiver that's had at least 95 receptions each of the last 2 seasons. He's just 1 year removed from being the wide receiver 10 in fantasy points per game. And you could make a lot of arguments in his favor that, hey, that coaching staff last year was totally dysfunctional. Everybody in the offense suffered because of it. That's why he was so upset and, pouting and walking off the field mid-play and all those different things that happened. You could make that case for him. But then you look at it, you go, I mean, the declining metrics are there for him too. We don't just want to pick on these older receivers because I actually think sometimes that's an area of value in fantasy where you can go get these guys pretty cheap and they can still put up a couple good seasons for you, especially in Dynasty. I've had a lot of success doing that. But you look at some of the metrics for Moore last year, right? He posted career lows in yards per route run, 1.44 yards, yards per touch, 9.3. And then like the most condemning one of all was the fact that he failed to top 1,000 yards, despite the fact that he had 98 receptions last year. And I know like Ben Johnson showing up is a great thing, but then you go up against that with the idea that they went out and added more pass catchers and like highly drafted guys in Colston Loveland and Luther Burden. And Luther Burden, somebody that could definitely come in and like start to eat DJ Moore's lunch, I think, at some point here. The other area that I'm a little bit worried about is curious what they're doing in that backfield. Don't really know what the plan is there. They kept DeAndre Swift. I think Kyle Monangai is interesting. Roshan Johnson's been hurt. Monangai's hurt at the moment too, but I think Monangai is going to be back for week 1. But we're getting these reports that DJ Moore's getting used out of the backfield a whole bunch. And could we see like a, little Robert Woods late career resurgence where he starts to get even more work out of the backfield, which is something that he's done in his career before? Could that be a way that they find to get him the ball and to potentially boost some of his fantasy stats? So this offense, I think, is going to be better as the year goes along. I think Ben Johnson is going to get them humming. I think Caleb Williams is going to play a lot better this year. And DJ Moore is a player that has been very good for fantasy in the past. And it wasn't that long ago. But he's somebody that I've pushed down to like wide receiver 33. Just because, again, for the same reasons you're talking about with Courtland Sutton, I would rather be in on Rome Odunze and Emeka Egbuka and all these other guys that I think are on the rise versus DJ Moore, where I'm seeing those red flags and I want to get off that ride earlier rather than staying on the ride and watching it go down even further.
Yeah, I echo a lot of the same things you said there in terms of where you have DJ Moore ranked. I'm in the same range there, which again, it's just like the problem is just DJ Moore goes so early, like consensus ranked wide receiver 20. You and I are like 10 spots apart from that. It's just the confidence that he is the one, that he is so, not even just that he's the one, because I think he probably would still be considered the odds on favorite to be the one, but that he's so far ahead of Rome Odunze, so far ahead of all these other guys, the Luther Burns, the tight ends, everything like that. He's so far away the one that confidence is where I'm just like, I can't quite get there, even if I think DJ can have a bounce back season, because not only did the efficiency metrics decline, his reception perception metrics decline. Now he's like 28 years old. He's not in the range of like Tyreek Hill, where I think it's a physical decline. I think he just had a bad season last year. You could still see guys bounce back there and return to something close to their old form. I think that's totally possible. I'm actually really intrigued with some of the running back usage and the stuff out of the backfield. I've said for years that that's the way you want to use DJ Moore, in kind of like a Deebo Samuel type of way. That being said, Boone, if like he beats us because they use him as a running back, like I'm okay with that. I'm okay with taking the L on that. It's like, yeah, honestly, like I'm not projecting him to suddenly get like 300 or 500 rushing yards or something like that. And you know what? If he becomes that player, which I'd still be pretty skeptical that he could hold up in that type of workload. If he does, and that's how he outkicks he meets his wide receiver 20 ranking, I'm okay with taking the L on that one. But yeah, really, this is not so much a DJ Moore take for me. It's just I'm bullish on Odunze, and I think we should be skeptical about like how quickly the Bears offense gets rolling here, but that makes me equally skeptical that DJ Moore is just going to come in here and be the guy. So we're in lockstep on this one, buddy. Whether that ends up good for us or not, at least we'll go down together.
I have a lot of Rome Odunze shares, so I'm really hoping that Rome Odunze does take over as the number one guy there. And based on what we're hearing from the beat writers, based on what we saw in the preseason, I do think he might be the favorite. I don't know that I would actually think that Moore is the favorite still to be the number one, even though I believe people are still drafting it that way. I think Rome Odunze, if I had to make my pick, I would go with Rome Odunze being the number one in that offense moving forward.
Yeah, me too. Zach Miller, who among many things for Reception Perception, also runs my YouTube channel, and we posted a Rome Odunze video over there. He texted me today. He's like, "Rome video is really blowing up." He's like, he's just a gold mine for our YouTube channel. I was like, oh my god, if he's bad, it's gonna be tough. It's gonna be a tough year, and maybe next few years until people forget about him. It's gonna be a tough year for your boy. So let's not even speak that into existence. I'll change the subject here and go to my next player here that I'm a little worried I'm wrong about. And again, this isn't a player I like set out to be out on Tyler Warren or anything, but I have him ranked tight end 15, consensus ranked tight end 11. I'm not like offended that people are taking him as a top 12 tight end. I get it. He's a first round tight end. He looks like he's going to be the first read target on a lot of these plays. I mean, bro, I just can't get over the fact that this is probably not going to be a good offense. They've got Daniel Jones. Need I say more? They've got Daniel Jones here, and that's still crowded. You know, like, all right, people still want to be in on Josh Downs and the wide receivers. I don't see how you can be in on these receivers, like a guy like Josh Downs taking the step forward and be in on Tyler Warren, because those guys are going to kind of eat into the same area. So for me, I've just not been – and also, by the way – we keep doing this with all right, now it's Daniel Jones. How long is it going to be Daniel Jones for? Okay, I know Shane Steichen said that Daniel Jones is our starter for the rest of the year. I'm old enough to remember, because I'm older than 1 year old, that he said Joe Flacco is my guy for the rest of the season last year, and it lasted 2 games, and he was out of there for Anthony Richardson. So I don't know. Just again, like, I think we're doing a lot of projecting with, well, Tyler Warren's going to get a lot of footballs. He's going to be the first read guy in this offense. It's just, man, all right, we're going to have to just basically cross off some of these wide receivers as complete zeros if that's the case, which maybe they will end up being. But I think I'm pretty skeptical of that, just given how talented some of these guys are, Boone.
I don't know. I think this is one where we're actually going to disagree, because if I don't get that elite tight end early, if I don't get Tucker Kraft, who we all love and who I absolutely stole from you in a draft yesterday, we don't have to talk about that. I forced you to pick Dalton Kincaid later, which just perfect. Dalton Kincaid later to you was great, and I predicted it right when it all happened. I was like, you're going to end up with Dalton Kincaid, and sure enough, you did.
Yeah, in fairness, Boone, some of us were working yesterday during that draft. Some of us were hosting a live show during said draft. And yes, I mentioned on the show yesterday, I'm in the middle of this freaking live show with all of our bosses are drafting a fantasy team, and I'm trying to hold on. I drafted CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens. So then I was like, well, I guess I can't reasonably draft Jake Ferguson also. So I just was left with freaking Dalton Kincaid. So yeah, so punishment for me, like laughing at you in an episode to be forthcoming about your Bills homerism. So anyways, I'm sorry, but keep going.
No doubt. And right after that draft, you continued to do more stuff. You jumped on Reddit and did an AMA, and I was kind enough to jump in there with you and comment on the Tucker Kraft, Dalton Kincaid situation.
I'm like, get this guy out of my life.
A lot of people commented on that one. It was fun. But for Tyler Warren, if I don't get one of those elite tight ends, if I don't get our favorite, the Yahoo favorite, Tucker Kraft as my tight end, yeah, Warren's actually the one that I want to end up with. And I know not every first round tight end works out, of course, but I think the Colts were looking to finally get something more from that position. That's why they spent up to get him where they did in the middle of the first round. And the reports coming out of camp and out of the preseason were very strong, right? Like, he looked good in that first preseason game. They're saying that he's getting a ton of work and a ton of passes thrown his way. I also bring up the fact that on top of the 104 receptions and over 1,200 yards and 8 receiving touchdowns that he had in his final year of college, 26 carries for 218 yards and 4 touchdowns on the ground. And there's been some hints out of practice that maybe they'll find a way to use him like that as kind of that versatile weapon. They need to do something different, right? This offense isn't working. Shane Steichen, I think, normally, as in the past, has been a decent offensive coordinator. I think right now he's really struggling because I don't think he's a great head coach. And that speaks to what you're saying about the Joe Flacco call of, oh, yeah, we're going to make a switch, and then you switch right back and all that stuff. And I totally think that's how it's going to work out this year as well, right? It's going to be the exact same situation where they're going to flip-flop. It's going to be a few games with this guy, a few games with that guy, and it's ultimately, sadly, I think, going to lead to Shane Steichen probably losing his job and being an offensive coordinator for a team next year somewhere else. But I think in the meantime, Warren is going to be one of the top target getters in this offense. I've always felt like Michael Pittman is overrated, and he put up his best stats when they really didn't have anybody else there. And now that they've started to get some more pieces, we've seen his numbers drop back. He's also dealt with some injuries too, which is unfortunate. But
how dare
I think Warren is going to step up. I really like Josh Downs. I think those two are going to work in the area where Daniel Jones loves to throw, right? There's a reason that Wan'Dale Robinson was that PPR scam last year. Early in the year last year, Wan'Dale Robinson 13th in the league in targets when Daniel Jones was healthy and throwing him passes. I think those guys are going to get a lot of work in this offense. A.D. Mitchell, somebody who I love, but not really getting that opportunity. Alec Pierce, those guys are just kind of used as like field stretchers. So I think they are going to try to revolve this offense around Warren, Downs. I think it is going to be that way. And obviously, Jonathan Taylor in the backfield. So I'm kind of, interested in him, in taking him where he's going right now as that fallback in my mind if I miss out on those other guys that I mentioned.
Oh man, you just said so many things that offended me. Number one, you brought up the Wan'Dale Robinson early season target totals, which personally offend me. I know that's not a thing that you did. You didn't do it. That part didn't offend me, but just hearing it again bothers me.
Of course.
I don't know. You probably don't know this, but on the show last year, Jason Jung, our creative director here, he had a graphic of like tracking how close Wan'Dale Robinson was to 100 catches. Like we literally had a tracker for this because I was like, oh my god, this guy's gonna catch 100 passes and have like 600 yards. I was pretty close to getting that right. Anyways, so that offended me. Also, yeah, how dare you, Michael Pittman? I mean, Boone, you try to go out and play wide receiver through a back injury. I mean, just so dismissive of Michael Pittman. But no, but this is my problem. It's like, yeah, I kind of have to assume Michael Pittman is toast if Tyler Warren is going to be successful. I haven't brought these up in a while, but on the show with Nate where I did the ADP rank versus the wisdom of the crowd, like projections for how offenses are going to finish. They're projected to be the 24th best offense in the NFL. Maybe Tyler Warren can be a top 12 tight. Maybe he can quite literally be tight end 11, which is where he's being drafted to be. I'm just maybe trying to hit a bit bigger of a home run and attaching my tight end to a better offense there. That's why I've gone with Tucker Kraft. That's why I've gone with Jake Ferguson. I've even been okay taking a Colson Loveland ahead of Tyler Warren, which I know seems stupid because that's also a crowded offense, but I think that Bears offense is going to be better than the Colts offense. So there's just a higher touchdown ceiling. I actually don't, as much as I make fun of you about Dalton Kincaid, I actually think there's a pretty reasonable chance like Kincaid and Warren are reasonable bets. So again, it's not like a full fade on Tyler Warren here for me. It's just concerned about the offense and not seeing like as big of a separation between him and some of the other guys in this tier that maybe other analysts are. So, but it does sound like we disagree on this one a little bit.
Yeah, and I think once you get to that range, basically once you get past like Mark Andrews, Tucker Kraft, those guys, it is going to be very difficult to hit on someone that has that like really top 5 upside. I don't think Jake Ferguson is that answer because the fact that Pickens is there now. And as much as I have taken some of those guys in that range, like Evan Ingram and stuff, I just don't think they're going to be like weekly difference makers. They're going to be guys that like you feel about Warren, where they're just going to get you low end tight end 1 numbers. They'll get up to mid-range tight end 1 once in a while, but overall they're not going to impact your season. I do think that there's a chance, and I agree with the Loveland take. I would almost rather invest in those guys in the unknown and hope that they have the kind of rookie seasons that we've seen from some other rookie tight ends lately, and they can actually make a difference. And I do believe that Warren is somebody that in his offense has a better shot to do that this year than Loveland does because it's so crowded there in Chicago.
Yeah, I'll also maybe admit that I hated the idea of the Colts drafting like a tight end as soon as it became
Agreed.
like the most popular mock draft pick. Yeah, as soon as it became the most popular mock draft pick, and maybe I'm still lashing out. I'm still crashing out and lashing out about that draft pick with my fantasy ranking. So you know what? People that are listening to this podcast, watching this, you don't even have to listen to me on this. You can just ignore everything I just said. And to be able to do that, let's get a clean break from that last discussion. We're going to take a little quick break here. When we come back, we'll continue to roll through players that we are scared we might be wrong about right after this. All right, we are back. Justin, Boone, and I are continuing to roll through players that we are scared we might be wrong about. And Boone, we have two running backs here to discuss. Two running backs we're scared that we might be wrong about. And as producer Colin pointed out in the break, I don't think we've talked about these two players one single time this month. So let's have a conversation here about these next two guys. And I'll throw it to you for your pick, but also note, Boone, that I mentioned I wrote the article, guys I'm scared I'm wrong about. Both this was my other running back pick in addition to the guy I'm going to talk about. So let it rip here on Javonte Williams.
All right. So for me, I have Javonte down at RB 40, which might seem like a weird spot to have a guy that could be the number one running back on his team. But I'm just not buying him as the lead back there. And I don't think that he's going to provide enough fantasy value to make it a worthwhile pick. And that seems crazy because he is going later in drafts still, even though he's going higher than where I have him. He is super cheap and there's not that much risk involved. I understand it, but his ECR right now of RB 33, like that's just entirely built on people going, someone has to carry the ball in Dallas. I guess it's going to be that guy, right? Like, he has not proven that he can be this player anymore. And I think it's sad. Like if you look at his career, what happened to him, the injury, 2022, tears his ACL and LCL. I just don't think he's been the same player since that happened. But even before that injury, you can go back to his college days. He wasn't like a workhorse back anywhere. Like he was the guy that was always splitting with someone else. It was Michael Carter back in their days together in college. In Denver, he was never really given the run to be like that true lead back workhorse type guy. So in this situation in Dallas, where I think the projection for him potentially doing well is assuming that who else is going to get the work? He's going to get all the work here. I don't know that's going to be the case. And if they do that, I don't even know that he can hold up to that kind of workload. Like if you look at his career, right, prior to the injury, a little over 4 yards per carry. I'm not a big yards per carry guy, but I do think it's notable because the injury is like a stark difference here. Before the injury, a little over 4 yards. After the injury, 3.6, 3.7. Those are journeyman numbers. And that's what I think he is. I think he's a player that when he came to the league, cool name, exciting prospect. People thought he was going to become something more, and it never materialized. And then he ends up with this injury, and now he's not the same guy. And, we've seen this happen to other players too. It's unfortunate. I don't know how the Cowboys saw something that made them go, yeah, that's going to be our number one running back this year. I think that's a big time mistake. It's a very strange play. The running backs in Dallas also have the 8th hardest fantasy schedule this year. So now we're taking a guy that I don't believe in. We're putting him up against one of the harder schedules. It just does not make sense to me. And the last thing I will say here, stat-wise, during his 4-year career in the NFL, and I know he was hurt there, so he missed time one of those years, he's only topped 75 rushing yards 7 times. That shows me there is not a big ceiling with this guy. And at some point, I think Jaden Blue is going to come back and factor into this backfield. Maybe they'll find someone else via trade or they'll sign somebody. But I just don't think that Javonte Williams is the answer here, regardless of how cheap you can get him in drafts.
Okay, lots to get into here. First of all, again, like I said, he was in my article too. And I'm actually lower than you are from a rankings perspective. I have him running back 45 because it's just like, if you're using my rankings, I don't want you to draft Javonte Williams. Yeah. He goes late enough where it's like whatever, but running back 33, you said is the consensus ranking here, Boone. That's
sure
just
I saw today. Yeah.
That's just okay. People are doing projections. They're just penciling him in as the starting running back and being like, all right, cool. Yep. That any old Dallas Cowboys starting running back, that's going to be coming out to running back 33. Here's the thing though. Like, let's just assume for a second that he is just going to be the starter all year long. He's going to be the guy that just he's the guy. Okay. Last season in Denver, Javonte Williams had a 43% share of the backfield touches. He was the lead ball carrier, and he was targeted on 24% of his routes last year. 24.6% of his routes. Like, he already got a lot of opportunity in what was a pretty good offense behind a really good offensive line. How did that go, folks? Was he running back 33? Like, was he worth taking? I don't know. He actually might have been running back 33. I really actually don't know off the top of my head, like, what his fantasy production was. But it wasn't like, oh, I'm so glad I took him. I'm so glad. Yeah, he was actually running back 31. So maybe maybe I just actually argued against myself.
If the feed just goes out at some point, everyone knows that producer Colin is a Cowboys fan. Yeah. And it's going to be producer Colin just like totally pulling the plug on this episode now that we're saying negative things about his Cowboys. But when you get to that point in drafts, would you not rather have the Zach Charbonnets and the Braylon Allens and the Trey Bensons and even like the Bashal Tutons and those guys who I think could have an opportunity to put up good stats if they get into that kind of role, versus a guy that, yeah, he's going to be like a RB3 for you, and you're not going to be excited to start him any week, and he's just going to be more of like a roster clogger than he is a guy who's going to help you win weeks and potentially win your title.
Yeah, he was running back 41 in points per game, okay, which is obviously that's the smart thing to do. It's not total points, it's points per game. As we all know, running by 41 in points per game. So again, like somewhere where we actually have him ranked, Boone, that's probably what he would be if he's just a lead ball carrier. Wouldn't you rather have Jaden Blue? Like you're saying all those names. Wouldn't you just rather? I know Jaden Blue obviously is dealing with the injury right now, but wouldn't you just rather take the shot on Jaden Blue? When is the last time that it's worked out where you just walk into a season, it's like, well, somebody's got to get the touches, as you said at the top here. Somebody's got to get the touches. Somebody's got to be the lead ball carrier. When has that guy ever worked out? Those are usually the number one players that get rug pulled. And I get it. He's going late enough where he's not in the old running back dead zone where it's like in past years, he probably would have gotten launched up to the 5th or 6th round or something. And he's not going there. He's going way later. So it's really not going to kill you. But the reason that I said that I'm just worried I'm going to be wrong is that, like, yeah, I'm not going to take him anywhere. I've ranked him way low. And what if he is the Dallas Cowboys starting running back? Then we definitely missed out on some potential value there. But it's just that it just is. He's not a very impressive player, not a very impressive resume. I guess it could work out because of situation, but we also haven't even considered, Boone, that what if they make a midseason trade? What if they're I've said they could be the Breece Hall team. What if they're the Travis Etienne team or the Tank Bigsby team if they're trying to move on from one of those running backs? Whenever you come into it and say, hey, who else is going to get the ball? There can always be somebody else in addition to the guys like Jaden Blue who are currently on the Cowboys roster right now.
Well, I'll throw out another name, and this will segue into the guy that you want to talk about here, but it doesn't even have to be one of the top guys. What if they're a Devin Singletary team? Like Devin Singletary, I think I would much rather see as the starting back there. I think you brought that up a long time ago about the idea of like, what if the Giants ever let go of Singletary? Could he end up in Dallas and be the guy? I certainly think if he was in Dallas, he would be the one starting over Javonte. So sorry, producer Colin, who I'm sure is crying right now as we say all these things, but yeah, do not really want to invest in that Cowboys backfield. Jaden Blue, maybe, but overall, I think I'm just going to stay away from it, and I'm going to spend all those later picks on those guys that I mentioned earlier who I'm much more excited about.
Before I get to my name here, I'll tell just one quick story from the Fantasy Football Expo because this is really funny and it makes me look bad, which I'm always down to make myself look bad. When JJ Zachariason took Javonte Williams in the Kings Classic draft, I was like, "Wow, bro! I literally said, have some self-respect, Javonte Williams." Because I'm JJ and I are friends, I'm just trying to troll him, whatever. And because sometimes you do this, then you start like doubling down and like making the take more. And I was like, that guy's not even going to make the week 1 roster. Like he's going to get cut. Miles Sanders is going to be better than him. Just like saying that. And then like later after that, I took Brian Robinson, who actually did get forced out by his team. So, and I like made it a bit on Twitter where I said something about Javonte Williams and JJ, and apparently people in his Discord were like, "Oh my God, like, do you like Javonte? Is he your guy?" Because I was like, "Oh, there's your guy, Javonte." So I was such a jerk about it that I 100% deserved to have the true rug pull, which was Brian Robinson Jr. with the Commanders.
Fantasy karma right there at its best, yeah.
Yeah, it absolutely was. And like I said, I deserved it. In fairness to myself, I believe when I took Brian Robinson, I said, whatever, Brian Robinson Jr., go ahead. We'll go ahead and take him here. And whatever is very much the way that I feel about this next player, which is Cam Skattebo, another guy that, like, as producer Colin said, we have not talked about this guy all August. And you know what? I think for good reason here, because has there been any pop on Cam Skattebo other than he's been dealing with an injury? Tyron Trace is a guy that when we opened up in draft season, Boone, I wasn't really trying to take him either. And I kind of had the classic hedge ranking, these two guys in the same tier and like, hey, we'll just see what happens. Well, we've seen what's happened. I thought it might just be, hey, week by week, these guys are like eating into each other committee here, but Skattebo's not been at practice. He's been dealing with an injury, and all the like Jordan Ronan from ESPN said like, "Hey, this is Tyron Tracy's job." Now Jordan kind of tried to say that, for now, all that stuff, of course, but the report was that, and by all accounts, Tracy's the starting running back right now. Now Tracy could be playing himself out of this job at some point, but I've moved Tracy into kind of like the decent little running back 3 bet kind of tier. And Skattebo's a guy that I'm just way lower than consensus on. He's like still running back 39 in consensus rankings. I have him at running back 48. So he is definitely trending down overall. But I don't think he's trending down enough, Boone, because I'm like warming to the Giants offense a little bit just because I think Russ can be functional, and we've seen Jackson Dart in the preseason, but still, I'm not all that geeked up about like the freaking starting running back of the Giants. And so if it's going to be Cam Skattebo, who's a fun player, he's a hammerhead, I just have like never been interested in drafting him in fantasy this year.
Yeah, I agree. There was a brief time, I might have said this on the show before, but there was a brief time. So I was like all in on Tracy early in the offseason. I was like, yeah, he's definitely going to be the guy. They like him. I like what he did last year. He looked good out there. And then I fell victim to like those early training Cam Skattebo, catches and highlights. He was making a few plays, some acrobatic grabs around the end zone. And I went, okay, well, could see him being like a Dable guy and maybe he'll start to work in a little more. And I moved them up together. And then he got hurt, and that sort of sealed the deal, because when he got hurt, that was when all the beat writers came out and started to say like, no, this is going to be 70-30. It's going to be Tracy's backfield. And we'll see if Skattebo can kind of carve something out as the year goes along. And I believe he's back at practice now, so should be out there week 1. But, had an injury. It's always a risk that he could end up getting hurt again and aggravating something. That's what happened the first time, right? He got hurt. He rushed back, hurt himself again, and then had to miss a little more time. And you look at what Tracy did last year, like RB21 from week 5 on. That was when he actually started to get the bulk of the snaps, and he was producing. We know he has a good pass catching background. So even if the team isn't doing well, he's got other paths where he could go down to put up fantasy points. And I think just with Cam Skattebo, 4.71 40 time, that's 17th percentile, 24th percentile speed score. He can be a contributor, but can he win in the NFL in the ways that he won in college? Can he just kind of be this big presence and dominate guys? He's not Derrick Henry. He's not that kind of guy. So then you wonder, can he be the lead back playing that sort of style? Or does he fit more as just a contributor in a backfield and a complementary piece? I think that is probably true. The concern here for Tracy now would be, do they get someone else involved around the goal line? Because we even saw in the preseason, Tracy took his shot. He didn't get in. And then they put Devin Singletary out there and Devin Singletary got in, right? So you worry, could Skattebo be that guy where they put him around the goal line and now that starts to eat into some of Tracy's upside? I certainly think that's possible. But the idea of Tracy giving up this backfield, I don't think that's going to happen this year to Cam Skattebo.
Yeah. And even if Tyron Tracy, which is, again, I'm not trying to rush out to draft Tyron Tracy or anything like that, because Devin Singletary is still in the mix here, as you mentioned. And Devin Singletary is a Brian Daboll guy. Coaches love having him around. So, yeah, he's a guy that could still be very, very much involved in the proceedings this year, especially if he sticks on the roster. So, yeah, it just, to me, the Skattebo thing, I like the way you framed that in terms of his skill set. Maybe he just ends up being one of those great college player, not an NFL back type. I mean, he fell to the 4th round. That was another thing it was weird how much people were just so quick to throw Skattebo in the early best ball drafts ahead of Tyron Tracy, because I was one of these guys has played already and done pretty well, not great, but pretty well in the NFL. The other one is just a college player that we're familiar with, and they're both former day 3 draft picks.
And when you think about it from a drafting standpoint, Tracy I am willing to take because he's one of the cheapest starters out there who I think could give you low-end RB2 numbers. Maybe there's not an elite ceiling there, but where you're getting him, you could put him into your RB2 spot. Maybe you could put him into your flex spot, certainly. And that's not bad value for where he's going in drafts. For Skattebo, where he goes, it goes back to the conversation we had about Javonte Williams. Do I want him or do I want Zach Charbonnet and Trey Benson and all these other guys, even Ray Davis and some of these other backups that are in better offenses? And if their starter goes down, which is what I think would need to happen in New York in order for Skattebo to get in there. If the starter goes down, I would rather have Ray Davis and some of these other players, Brian Robinson Jr. with the 49ers. I would rather have these guys than have Cam Skattebo. So yeah, I'm with you. He's not somebody that I'm getting very much of. But I will say, I guess the spot that I kind of disagree with is I don't mind drafting Tracy. I'm willing to take him where he's going because I feel like there is a good shot that he's going to give me production there. And that he's not going to be a league winning pick, but he's going to be somebody that I can grab and throw in my lineup and might eat some innings up for me early in the season before one of those other guys I mentioned actually comes on and steps up and becomes a real fantasy impact player.
Yeah, I don't mind taking is where I'm at. Not again, I'm just not saying I'm not rushing out to grab him, but he makes sense. I have him ranked at 25. He's consensus ranked 27 there, I believe. So yeah, definitely a guy that I'm totally fine. What is DeAndre Swift doing at 21? Can we talk about that for a second? What is DeAndre Swift doing ahead of Tony Pollard? Tony Pollard, by the way, people need to be drafting Tony Pollard. Okay, I get it that he's in the same tier as RJ Harvey, which are and some of these other interesting names, but Tony Pollard belongs in a tier, a group above this. Tajay Spears on IR with the high ankle sprain, a real deal high ankle sprain. Pollard needs to be going higher than this. He should not be next to DeAndre Swift. So yeah, and I say Swift's name because he's a guy I'd rather have Tyron Tracy as ahead of DeAndre Swift. Just last point here, Boone. Again, we are still talking about the starting running back of the New York Giants, who in these wisdom of the crowd offensive rankings, 29, 30, 30. The 30th best offense maybe in the NFL. we're discussing the starting running back of that team. So just something to note here.
I agree with you, though, that I do think they are going to be more interesting, at least more interesting to watch. It might not lead to like a ton of wins, but they're going to be a very interesting watch. There's some really good talent on that team. Like I said, I like Tracy. We know Malik Neighbors is there. And when Jackson Dart gets out there, it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun to watch. He's going to be a guy that we could consider for fantasy at that point. Theo Johnson at tight end is somebody who I think people aren't really talking about, but if you're looking for like the deepest of deep tight end targets, like a true
I'm
sleeper.
Talking about him.
Yeah, he was a guy right last year that put up some good numbers, and now you figure the quarterback play is going to be better this year. So why not Theo Johnson when you're talking about, tight ends who are outside of the top 20 at the position? So we're throwing some real Hail Marys there, but that's a guy that I think could certainly step up, and a guy that I'm happy that I took in like the 5th round in a lot of dynasty rookie drafts, because he's somebody that after what I saw last year, I think can be the starter for the Giants moving forward and could potentially put up some good numbers if this offense takes a step forward, which I think it's going to.
Yeah, I have a suspicious amount of Theo Johnson in fantasy this year as like my tight end too. I'll just call it a suspicious amount of Theo Johnson. On that note, boy, we're talking about the damn Giants and Theo Johnson. On that note, we are going to take our final break of the show. When we come back, we're hopping into the fantasy film room. We're talking 2 more young players that we're worried we might be wrong about. Well, for me, not for Boone, a young player that I'm worried I might be wrong about. We'll get into those guys right after this. Welcome to the Fantasy Film Room presented by Toyota, the official automotive partner of the NFL. For today's film room, we have 2 guys that we are, again, against consensus on as we head into the busiest weekend of drafting this year. And these are 2 guys that we're worried, hey, we might be wrong about being a little behind consensus on these players. And Boone, I love your pick here. I mean, there's nobody that would scare me. Like, I've been in on this guy for basically every year of his career, and it took a minute for it to turn out to be a correct answer, but it's been a correct answer for quite some time. And there's nobody I would be more scared of fading than the player you're about to talk about here.
And that is Derrick Henry. And I feel like this would not be the first time that Derrick Henry would have burned me if it works out that way. Just continues to defy every age curve, continues to produce. The guy cannot be stopped. But at some point, it has to end, right? At some point, a bigger back.
If you keep saying it
has to
every
go
year,
down.
you'll be right one year. If you keep doing it,
I know,
if we
and
keep
I'm
doing
not
it every
that
year.
far off. Like I have at RB7. I think right now he's being, ECR, and I think he's being drafted at RB5. But in my overall rankings,
where do you have him
I
ranked? Oh yeah, that was sorry. That was
second.
what I
I
was
was
going to ask.
as a
Where do you have him?
second round pick, and I
Okay.
think for the most part, ADP wise, he goes in the first round in a lot of drafts. And I know in one of my home leagues for the longest time, I would always pass on him, and we had the same manager every year that would just take him, click, and would have success with him every year. And it became like a running joke. So maybe that will be the case again this time around. The age thing has to, like, this guy can't be 40. Like, he's not Tom Brady at 45 doing this. Like, there's just no way. It has to happen at some point. But the thing that does scare me, and I brought this up before, is the idea that a couple of years ago in 2023, Gus Edwards was Gus Edwards, and he still had 13 touchdowns in this offense. So there's such a high floor with Henry because barring injury, he's going to fall into double-digit touchdowns. He's going to be a fine pick for you, even if he doesn't hit that like ceiling outcome again. Now, the thing that I want to bring up though here is the other guy in that backfield. And I'm not talking about Justice Hill. I'm talking about Keaton Mitchell. Keaton Mitchell is such an intriguing piece for the Ravens this year because if people remember a couple of years ago, Keaton Mitchell was just shot out of a cannon. Like there are a few players that entered the NFL that look like they're moving at a different speed than everyone else out there. Keaton Mitchell was one of them, and he was breaking big runs. He's a guy that constantly, you're not supposed to go to the outside. It doesn't matter for him. He could take it to the outside, just beat everyone there and break it for a big run. He also just has like really good movement for a guy that's moving that fast, pretty good vision, and he's able to just kind of find his way along without losing like a lot of his speed and his movements. Very, very impressive. Now, he had an injury. He's a smaller guy, right? 5'8", 190. He did have an injury that year and then basically had a lost season. But you look back before that, I mean, he was averaging over 8 yards per carry, like was just an incredible addition, not as a guy that's going to be the lead back, but a guy that could be the ultimate change of pace. And you think about where Henry's at in his career, and it's not that you want to take Derrick Henry off the field, but what if you could work in this younger back and get him out there breaking these long runs, totally throwing something different at the defense? I think the Ravens are going to do that this season. And in the first week of the preseason, he comes out 9 carries for 68 yards and a score. He's back. Last year, he came back at the very end of the year, was not the same guy. Now he's healthy. He is back to being the same player or very close to the same player. He offers too much juice to hold him back. So I think, like I said, he's a nice complement to a 31-year-old Derrick Henry. I think it would be a great matchup to put those guys together and have that combination out of the backfield for the Ravens. And I think that is one way where maybe we could take a little bit away from Henry because we have another back that is so explosive and can produce that way in the backfield. But again, maybe they'll just both hit because Henry seems inevitable. He's just an undeniable force.
Yeah, he is inevitable, undeniable force. He's like Teflon, just nothing bothers him. He just keeps on moving. He's unbreakable. I do think that there's a chance that, Keaton Mitchell's more involved, but you mentioned that Gus Edwards kind of stuff from the Ravens offense, and that's what makes me feel really good about Henry, that even if he does decline and he's like a small miss as a first-round pick, like he really is still going to be a good fantasy back because he can do what people were worried that he was going to do last year, which is like, he's probably going to have decline from a rushing efficiency perspective, but he'll probably still score double-digit touchdowns, which I think there's actually a chance maybe that happens this year. He declines a little bit efficiency-wise, and then he still scores double-digit touchdowns because this is the best offense in the NFL. Maybe it's not the best offense in the NFL anymore if Derrick Henry declines, but again, I really feel like some players, I'm just going to have to see it to believe it, and I do feel like Boone, Derrick Henry is one of those players. Again, you have a pick from one of the best offenses in the NFL. I have a pick from one of the best offenses in the NFL, which is your Buffalo Bills. Keon Coleman. I'm like when we get to the 50s of the wide receiver ranking, it's like, who cares if you're a few spots off? I have him at 57. His consensus ranking is 50. In best ball drafts, I actually took a little bit of Keon Coleman because I do think there will be spike weeks, but I am afraid that I could get this one wrong, and I'm just like completely ignoring, and honestly, the whole industry is completely ignoring like a second-year player attached to Josh Allen. I think people know my issues with Coleman's game. which is dating back to his prospect profile. He was a poor performer, sub 35th percentile among prospects in success rate versus man and press coverage. He's just not a separator. And as a rookie, so okay, he's not a separator. Those like guys who are non-separators as college players, they need to move into the slot. All the guys that have hit in that category, they've moved into the slot. Keon Coleman last year basically only plays X receiver. 3rd percentile success rate versus man. Rookie year, 8th percentile success rate versus press. But weirdly, to make it a film take here, I actually kind of think Josh Palmer could be the reason that Keon Coleman ends up banging me here as this wide receiver 57 ranking, because Palmer had not a special success rate versus press, but 59th percentile success rate versus press, Boone. So if Palmer can go out and play as not every snap X receiver, but mostly outside, mostly on the X, and allows Coleman to move around, that's how, like, I'm ranking him right now as if his usage will be exactly the same as it was last year. If it's not, I'm going to adjust quickly from a prior's perspective and think like, all right, he actually can take a step forward. Right now, I just don't see it. In as long as put that mug down, as long as we're in this role with him, put that mug down. Bill's mug on the. I mean, for God's sakes, some people listen to the podcast. I don't even know what you're doing, Boone. So stop. But if Keon Coleman moves around a little bit more, I think he can be more productive. But if he just stays at the X, he's just going to be a volatile weekly producer, Boone.
I mean, the Bills mug, the Bills helmet behind me, the Bills love. What did you say to me when I messaged you on Reddit and I said the Tucker Craft stuff? You said, "How dare you, sir?" I believe that. I feel like that's my response here.
Yeah.
How dare you, sir, end this episode this way? You know how I feel. I think you made some very good points there. Obviously, whenever you have reservations about a receiver, I'm going to take notice and I'm going to bake that into my outlook for them. I think despite everything you said, Coleman surprised me last year. Like, going into last season, I didn't think he was going to be able to produce much initially. And yet he came out and he posted at least 50 yards and or a touchdown in 4 of those first 5 outings. And that was despite all like the inconsistency, despite all the things you're saying about, him having trouble. He needs to figure out how to win in the pros. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty hopeful that he's able to do that now, because as we saw last year, he was coming on. Like, before that injury happened, 4 for 125, a 5 for 70, and a touchdown. And if we take just the 5 games before he got hurt last year, because when he came back after that, wasn't the same player. I think the injury totally derailed the season, and that was unfortunate. But if we look at it, so the 5 games before he got hurt, those were only his 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th NFL appearances. He averaged 64 yards per game over those contests. That's a 1,000-yard pace. And I'm not here to tell you that he's going to become like an elite player. I'm just saying where he's going in drafts, I think you're getting a guy who could potentially be in that range of other receivers that we really like. I think maybe by the end of the season, we look at Coleman as somebody that's a wide receiver 3 for fantasy, has some of those wide receiver 2 spiked weeks, can score a bunch of touchdowns. The touchdowns are his path towards like really unlocking his fantasy ceiling. So even if he doesn't get those, I think we're looking at a guy that has a good chance to be the top receiver on a team that desperately needs it, when their previous top receiver, who doesn't have the highest ceiling in Khalil Shakir is entering the season with a high ankle sprain. We don't know if he's going to be out there week 1. We don't know if he's going to be healthy early in the year. And high ankle sprains can be a tough thing to get over. So I think there's just a lot of paths here where he could potentially crush it and not be Nico Collins, but come out and be a very viable fantasy player that you're getting in the late rounds.
All right. On that note, that is going to do it from us today here. Thanks again to Toyota, the official automotive partner of the NFL. Just letting Boone get in some pure uncut homerism here at the end of the show. That is what you need to do it. Make sure to like and subscribe to this channel if you're watching us on YouTube, because tomorrow we have a very, very special show to put a bow on our draft season coverage. Ray Garvin, Justin Boone, Scott Pianowski, and myself will share our final pieces of draft advice as we head into the busiest draft weekend of them all. That is going to be live 5 p.m. Eastern tomorrow. Until then, we are out.